Just a reminder to our Speculating Wildly About Crime listeners, this is for entertainment purposes only and solely the thoughts and opinions of our team. We do invite you to sit back, relax, and enjoy the show.
Welcome to Speculating Wildly About Crime. I'm your host today, and my name is Missy. Today we're going to talk about Joan Risch. Now, I need to ask you really quick, has anybody here heard of this story?
No, ma'am.
I was actually really hoping the answer would be no. It is, I want to say, a famous missing person case, but this one is not as widely talked about, even though it is a very mysterious case and has been unsolved for a really long time. So this actually was in the 1960s this happened. I also want to ask you, has anyone ever seen the movie Gone Girl?
Yes.
Okay.
I can't remember. I keep going to Girl on a Train. That's not it. So.
No, that's not it.
Maybe. Oh my gosh.
I feel like maybe I have, but I'm like,
I guess we're about to ruin it for you.
Not quite. I think that this story is called sometimes the original Gone Girl story, but we'll get to that when we talk more about our theories and our speculations of what actually happened, just because there's no proof that's what happened. But we'll get there in a little bit. First, let's talk about Joan and her husband, Martin. They actually only moved to the place that they were living, and it was a nice little suburban neighborhood in Lincoln, Massachusetts. They'd lived there for 6 months when on the morning of October 24th, 1961, Martin left to go on a work business trip. He was going from the Boston International Airport to New York, and he was going to be gone for just a day or two to do business. He was the executive at a Fitbird paper company, and so he was often traveling for business. Joan gets up, she makes her 2 children breakfast. Her younger child's name was David. He was 2, and she had an older daughter who was only 4, but her name was Lillian. Joan makes breakfast for the children. She tidies up the house. She's getting things ready for the day, and she has to go drop her son David off at the neighbor's house. So right across the street from her lived a woman who would actually be not just her neighbor, but also a good friend of hers. And the woman's name was Barbara Baker. And Barbara always helped out with watching, Joan's kids, and she would help with watching Barbara's kids. And it was just one of those neighborly, friendly things that they did for each other. So that morning, Barbara was going to watch David for a little bit while Joan went to the dentist, and she was going to take Lillian with her. She went to the dentist. She got a cavity filled, and she made an appointment for the following week. The dentist and everyone that had worked in the office said that Joan was in great spirits. Lillian was good while she was there. Everything seemed fine. Following the dental appointment, Joan and Lillian go do a little bit of shopping. They also go to the grocery store, and Joan picks up items for dinner. Joan Risch returns home around 11 o'clock that morning, goes back across the street, gets David from Barbara's house, tells Barbara just a little bit about the dentist and her morning, and they have a nice conversation. And Barbara also doesn't notice anything odd going on with Joan. There's a couple of things I want to point out really quick. When Joan was gone, the mailman stopped by, the garbage man came by, and the milkman came by, and all 3 of them actually said there was nothing weird or unordinary going on in that neighborhood or even at the Risch house that day. But the milkman did notice that a week prior, there was an unusual car that was parked in that driveway, a car that nobody knew whose car that was. It was a 2-tone car. After Joan gets David, they're back at the house. It's about 11:15, and the dry cleaner came over and picked up some suits that Martin needed dry cleaned. Same thing. Doesn't notice anything weird with the house or Joan. Everything seems perfectly normal. Joan lays David down for a nap. He always takes a nap every day from noon to 2 p.m. Around about 1 p.m., Barbara Baker's son, who is about the same age as Lillian, comes over to Joan's house, and they're out playing in the yard. Now, what Joan's doing at this time, we actually don't know. There was a book that was open in her kitchen. She could have been reading. There were also grass clippings found in a garbage can, which made people speculate maybe she was gardening or cutting the lawn because the garbage can had came already that morning. Sometime before 2 p.m., Joan brings both of the kids. So now she's bringing Lillian and then Barbara's kid back across the street and then just drops them off in the yard. Now these kids are young, they're like 4, but drops them off in the yard and tells her daughter Lillian, "I'll be right back." About 2:15 p.m., Barbara's looking out of her window and she sees Joan outside. She's wearing a trench coat. She's walking funny with her arms outstretched, and it looks like she's either carrying something red or she's playing with her son, who might be wearing something red. I don't actually think that Barbara even knew that the kids were in her yard at this point. So now we're going to skip ahead to 3:45 p.m. Barbara then takes Lillian back across the street to Joan's house. She hasn't seen Joan in a while, but she says, "Lillian, go back in your house." She wants to take her own kid out shopping, and so she can't watch Lillian anymore. So she leaves to go shopping with her son. They're not gone very long. It's about 4:15 p.m. when she gets back, but we're going to circle back to that because I do have a couple more things I want to point out really fast. So we're going back in time a little bit here. At 3:25 p.m., a car is seen by a neighbor's daughter who's riding the bus home, and she sees a weird car in the Risch driveway. I assume that this neighborhood is that everyone's tight-knit and paying attention to what's going on at the neighbors' houses, especially in that time frame of the 60s. Another neighbor actually does have to stop on the road as this strange car is backing out of the driveway. I don't have any descriptions. I don't know if they ever did get a description of what the car was or anybody driving it. But so now 2 people have seen this strange car in that driveway. At 2:45 p.m., there was a woman who was either Joan or matched Joan's description, and she was seen walking about 300 yards from that Joan and Martin's house. Now, there was also another sighting of a woman who either was Joan or matched the description of Joan, and she was wearing a trench coat and a handkerchief covering her head. She was walking down route, clutching her abdomen, and it was reported that the woman had either mud or blood on the back of her legs. It also looked like the woman was a bit disheveled and maybe confused, okay? I must also note here that Route 128 was actually undergoing construction at the time. So that's another thing to just keep in the back of your head when we talk about theories. But this Route 128 was miles, and I also read somewhere like up a hill. So from Joan and Martin's house, it would have been like 5 or 6 miles or something like that. But if it was Joan, she would have had to cross several lanes of traffic as well. And this sighting was somewhere between 3:15 and 3:30. So the last time that she was actually seen that we know was 2:15 by her neighbor, okay? There were those other sightings, but when we talk about eyewitness accounts, we don't know how accurate those are. Okay, so we're gonna go ahead in time again and go back to that 4:15. Barbara just gets home with her son. They're in the house, and Lillian comes back over to the house, and Lillian says, "Mommy's not home, and there's red paint everywhere." You guys right away, I see your face. Because Barbara is probably making the same face at this point. There's something wrong, right? So she goes back over to the house and she discovers that the kitchen is not covered in red paint. It is covered in blood. So she goes to get another neighbor and they decide they're going to search the house. I do have to say at this point, David is upstairs and he's in his crib and he's okay. He is crying because his diaper's wet and he is upset. Luckily, David was safe, but obviously something very bad happened here. So they call the police. It's about 4:33 p.m. at this point. Jamie, if I could very nicely have you pull up our crime scene photos, I'm going to start talking about what police walked into, which, by the way, it is a mess. It is a mess. In this picture, you're not quite seeing the blood, but what you are seeing is the wastebasket, which was normally kept underneath the counter. So now it's out in the middle of the kitchen floor. You also will see the phone was ripped off the wall. And if you can see that the receiver is coming out of the wastebasket there. Let's go on to the next one. Now you're seeing we have blood everywhere and paper towel. And I'm going to just go through what else was found. Blood was found on the walls and the floor. There was a table that was in the middle of the kitchen. You don't see it in this photo, but it was overturned and everything that was on that table was on the floor. We saw the garbage can with the phone in it. So the garbage can was in the middle of the floor, as well as the phone that was ripped off of the wall. In the wastebasket, there were 2 empty bottles of whiskey and 5 empty beer bottles. Now, Martin later did tell the police that Joan and him actually did drink one of the whiskey bottles the night before. Where the other whiskey bottle came from, he didn't know. And the beer bottles, he also didn't know where those came from. Again, keep that in the back of your mind as well. There was a phone book that was found in the kitchen. The phone book was open to a page that had emergency numbers. And I do have to tell you that they didn't have 911 until 1968. So if you needed to call the cops, the fire department, or anyone, you had to actually look the number up in your phone book. So that page was left open in the kitchen. There was a bloody palm print and maybe a thumbprint found on the phone, but the prints were never matched to anybody. And that was friends, family, neighbors, anybody else. I do have to point out Joan's fingerprints were not on file. So it very well could have been Joan's fingerprints, and they were never able to match the fingerprints because maybe they were Joan's. There were bloody paper towels. You see the paper towel right there. Bloody paper towels, as well as a little pair of David's overalls were also bloody and found on the floor. It had looked as though somebody had taken the overalls and the paper towel and had tried to clean up the mess that was in the kitchen and had given up. There's also another theory that when Lillian was dropped off, she might have gone in, saw the red paint, didn't see her mom, and then tried to maybe clean up the mess herself, which was why the paper towel and the overalls might have been there and covered in blood, because maybe Lillian had tried to clean it up. There were drops of blood on the stairs, drops of blood in the major bedroom, the hallway, and the children's bedroom. There was a blood trail that led from the kitchen and out to Joan's car. There was some blood on the top of her trunk, as well as a clothes hanger. But the clothes hanger was not bloody. The blood trail stopped at the car. Eventually, when they did have dogs come and try to find Joan's scent, her scent stopped across the street at Barbara's house. When police got there, they originally thought that Joan had committed suicide. But once they didn't find her body, they quickly changed their mind. There was nothing missing from the house. So if you're thinking maybe somebody broke in and it was a robbery, no one took anything. The only thing missing was Joan and her trench coat, but nothing else. Her purse was there. There wasn't any signs of a robbery. Also, there were no footprints. They did an extensive search for Joan and they never found her. And there was no trace of Joan after that day at all. Yeah. The picture, I don't even know. I feel like when you walk into that scene, it looks like a lot of blood, but actually it wasn't as much blood as it sounds like or looks like. There was only a half a pint of blood, which is only enough to do like maybe an injury, maybe a nosebleed, maybe a head wound, something like that. It wouldn't have been anything that was fatal. The blood was type O, which was Joan's blood type. However, it is one of the most common blood types, so it doesn't necessarily mean that it was Joan's. Okay, we're going to talk a little bit about theories because we don't have any other information at all in this case. There are a ton of theories and speculation. Okay, so let's talk about one of the major theories in this case.
Before you jump into theories, the question I had was, and I'm asking this because you said that's all we know. Was there anything odd about when the police did a first interaction with her husband, or how long did it take him to respond? How was the interaction?
As far as I know, Martin was alerted pretty quickly, and he did rush back to Massachusetts from New York. I don't think at all that Martin was involved.
Okay.
No part of this story and any of it like points to him at all. This is one of the rare cases where the husband probably did not do it.
He has a solid alibi.
He does. He was out of town. He was on a work business trip. Martin sincerely believed that Joan was alive until the day he died. Martin never changed his phone number, never moved, didn't have anything to gain from her disappearance or death. He very much believed that she was alive and was going to come home. He thought that something happened and she just wasn't able to.
And that makes me, okay, and maybe I'm still going with the husband didn't do it, but a solid alibi doesn't necessarily mean anything, because there have been multiple cases where, of course, I'm going to be on a business meeting while she gets killed because I hired somebody to kill her. So what perfect timing, right? So,
well, maybe that might come back. Maybe he'll still be there. I don't know. There are two major theories in this case, and this is the first one, which is that Joan staged her own disappearance. Now, the blood that was in the kitchen wasn't enough blood to be fatal, but we'll talk about some other things. Joan was a really smart woman. She had a bachelor's degree in English literature. She had worked as an assistant at a publishing company. And then she met Martin, and she gave up this thing that she worked really hard for, which was her profession, because she started more at the bottom and then moved her way up. And then had two children and became a housewife and a stay-at-home mom. And that's what she did. And who knows, maybe she wasn't super happy. Of course, everybody says she was happy. She never complained. In the 1960s, did anybody? Were housewives allowed to do that? I don't think so. Of course, Martin said she seemed happy that, and by all accounts, like they had a happy marriage and relationship, but do we really know if they did? We don't. The other thing was that Joan really had a limited social life. The only thing that she did outside of the home at this point was she was in the League of Women Voters. She did some volunteer work to make sure that women could vote and that kind of stuff. But she had all of these things that maybe she felt like she was giving up because she was a mom. And I think sometimes about David being 2, we don't even know if there was any postpartum here. That wasn't something that was talked about then either. So who knows? But, you know, the thought was that maybe she just decided she didn't want to do this anymore and she just quit and she staged her disappearance and she left. And one of the major reasons that this is a huge theory that people kind of gravitate toward is because that summer, Joan also was an avid reader and went to the library a lot. And she checked out 25 books. Now, not all of the books were about true crime, but a huge chunk of them were. She read a lot of books about murder and missing people, and it was something that she was really interested in. And in fact, there was one book called Into Thin Air, where the plot literally is that a woman goes missing and all that's left is the blood smear and paper towels. But the woman in the book staged her own disappearance. So people seeing that Joan read that, then were like, oh, maybe she also staged her own disappearance. I, of course, have a major problem with this theory, because if anybody looked at my Google search history, or probably any of your Google search histories, it looks like I would stage my disappearance tomorrow as well. Or it looks like I'm looking up how to get away with murder. we're all true crime people, and that's what we do. That's all of the stuff that we're taking into. It doesn't mean that we're going to go and do it. We do have to talk about another theory that maybe Joan injured herself. Maybe she was working in the garden or doing something. She injures herself. She notices she's bleeding. So she takes Lillian back across the street. She goes, hold on, I'll be right back. She needs to take care of whatever the situation is. So she's bleeding, and maybe she's cleaning up at the same time. Maybe she's really getting worried about whatever's going on. And she looks up the emergency number, and while she's going to call, maybe she grabs the phone and she accidentally rips the phone off the hook, and she starts to panic, and she goes out to her car, but then she's not going to drive. She's going to walk. At this point, she's a little disoriented. She decides to walk, but then she gets lost, and she's wandering around on Route 128, which is a construction zone. And the theory is that maybe Joan falls into one of the construction sites. And that's why we never find her again. They never did excavate the construction site or that area. So possible. You guys have any thoughts on that?
You say that theory, and I also say it literally aliens could also come down. That theory to me is Stretch Armstrong times 10.
But I can also see if you injure yourself and you're almost in a state of shock, and it's like an out of body experience almost, where you're like, okay, I know I need to get my kids safe. I'm not a mom, but I can only imagine that it's like that mom strength power where you can lift a whole car off your babies. Okay, they're safe. And now I'm just out of it. However, even saying that out loud, but it was, what'd you say, half, if you're that injured where you're that disoriented, where's the rest of the blood?
And not to poke holes in the theory, but if you were very concerned about your one child being okay, right? So you made sure she was over there, then you ran out of the house with your baby sleeping upstairs. That makes me kind of question that. And then also, Lily noticed that there was blood in the house. So I would think if you're moving her to this other house, you notice that there's blood on your mom, right? It wasn't like she was not observant of it, unless she just started gushing when she got home. I don't know, a 4-year-old can miss anything for sure, but
also with that, I would think that if Joan was actively bleeding and was taking Lillian over to the next house, there might be blood on her or on her clothes. She's a young child. She's not cleaning that up off of herself.
So the next theory is a botched abortion. So the thought is that maybe, okay, we need to back the 60s. We all know that there were abortions that happened, and sometimes it would be at a specific location where you would go somewhere secretly and have it done, or apparently it could be done at your house. I do have some problems with this theory but we're not there yet.
Missy, didn't you say that there was no blood on the coat hanger?
Way to pay attention, Janelle. There was no blood on the coat hanger, but I think that's part of the reason why this might be, you might think coat hanger, and that why is there a coat hanger?
Missy, was it manipulated in any sort of, I hate that I'm even saying this. Was it like in its still form, or was it bent or manipulated in any way that it did not?
It didn't say, but I feel like if it was manipulated, it would say. But as far as I know, it wasn't, and it was not covered in blood either.
But may I ask, when we say covered in blood, was it tested for blood, or could it have just been wiped off?
Oh, that I don't know. I also do need to, this was before the time where they were really doing a lot of DNA forensic stuff, and they didn't have a ton of stuff like we do today where they can test. I don't even know if they kept the stuff from this case, to be honest.
They were probably doing good to just get the blood type.
That was probably, you're right. Yeah. So the thought is that maybe with David's napping, husband's out of town, She quickly brings Lillian over to the neighbor's house. They're going to do a quick abortion, and it starts to go wrong. Something happens, right? She's bleeding. Maybe the person is still there. She is maybe panicking. She grabs the emergency number. She's going to call somebody. But of course, at that time, like, you're going to get arrested and get in a lot of trouble for this. This person that's performing the abortion panics, rips the phone off the wall. Let's go back to the beer and the whiskey. There were some people that believed that maybe that was like instead of giving her medicine, she just drank some alcohol to like numb it, have this procedure done, and then crap goes to crap real fast. It could make sense to why the blood trail ends at where the car is, because perhaps she got into the other car and that person took her somewhere, maybe with the promise of, hey, we'll fix you up somewhere else. And of course, that's not what happened. They probably killed her or something to save themselves. But that is one of the theories, is that maybe it was a botched abortion, or the other thought was maybe she had gone earlier at some other time and something afterwards, maybe she had hemorrhaged and then started to notice something was wrong. And then that's why she brought Lillian over. My biggest thing about that is I do have to put, there was no blood found in the bathroom. That's one. The other thing is, we did talk about the coat hanger, but if you remember, earlier in the day at 11:15 that morning, the dry cleaner came over. Could it have just been a coat hanger from the dry cleaner guy and just ended up on her car? Tying in with the abortion, the other thought was maybe she had a miscarriage. Maybe Joan didn't even know she was pregnant and she started to have some complications or a miscarriage or something was happening. Again, though, there's no blood in the bathroom. I just think that if you're going through something like that, you might go to the bathroom. This was a theory that was brought up to Martin, who of course said, no, Joan would never do that. Joan loved kids. She would never do that. I know her. Again, though, I want to, yeah. Do you really know? The other thing about Joan was that she really wanted to go back to work. As soon as her kids went to school, she wanted to go and become a school teacher, and she wanted to do other things. One of the things that points toward that would be maybe she just didn't want to have any more children. She had other things she needed to do or wanted to do. So that was one of the theories, was an abortion, botched abortion, or a miscarriage, or something where she's in a panic and rushes out quick. And yeah, any thoughts on that one?
Just something that kind of ran through my mind, because when I saw the blood originally, my mind went to miscarriage for a minute too. And you talked about, as a mom, you try and clean up messes as soon as they're made. So could she have been having that start in the bathroom as a miscarriage? She notices it, cleans it up, goes into the kitchen, and then shit got real.
That's a good thought. I don't know.
May I ask, was the beer cans that were found and the whiskey bottles that were found in the trash can, were they the same brands that were always in the house? Was, because you said he and she had a bottle of whiskey the night before. Were they the same brand?
I think the whiskey might have been, I don't know about the beer though. I don't know if the beer was like in the house. I know at some point I had read something, and how true it is, I don't know, that Martin didn't drink that kind of beer, but I don't know if that's a fact or not.
It's a different brand. Potentially she's thinking like, I can get whatever I want. I don't have to pretend to like his crappy beer that I don't even get. I can get whatever I want.
That's a good point though, Dana. That's a really good point. She did stop at the store. Who knows? Maybe she brought herself the beer and then went home and had some beers.
Poor Martin's heart by telling him that his beer sucks.
And just for myself, like having a nice beer while gardening sounds nice.
Part of me wondered if maybe she, who knows? Martin's gone. kids napping, other kids playing. It's the middle of the day, but who cares? She's got nothing else going on, right? Maybe she did want to partake in some beers and doing whatever she was doing, and maybe that was a normal for her. And maybe, like, part of me went, maybe she got injured doing something, and maybe part of it was she was drunk.
Did they find any blood outside? Did they look for blood outside? Because I think when we're talking about her having this injury, if she's going to be disoriented, that the pint of blood in the house wasn't going to be enough. But did she injure herself outside and there's a lot of blood outside they didn't notice?
No, the only thing that I saw the blood outside was that there's a little blood trail that led to the car, and then there was blood on the trunk of the car.
Okay.
And there was a lady that was walking down some street that had dark stuff on her legs that could have been blood, but there was no
Right.
blood spots on the road, right?
Yeah. And the other thing is that we don't really know how accurate some of the information is because so long ago. The problem that I have with the eyewitness accounts are that they're eyewitness accounts. The woman that they saw was wearing a trench coat. Now, Joan did have a trench coat. But the woman was also wearing like a scarf over her head or a handkerchief over her head. So I don't know. If you're driving by somebody who's walking down the road and you think it's someone, but like they're wearing a scarf, do you really know it's them? And eyewitness accounts really aren't that accurate to begin with.
I have a prime example of that. When I came in from work and Cody was leaving, there was a couple that always jogs down our street. And I was walking up to the porch and Cody was like, I could have swore that was our friend Chuck that was jogging. And to me, that person looks nothing like Chuck. But every time I've thought about that guy since, all I see is Chuck.
Yeah.
And so if there was a jogger that went missing in my neighborhood today, I would describe my friend Chuck.
We're on the same wavelength then, because I was going to say, if you say an eyewitness testimony or whatever isn't as accurate as we need it to be, how do we know the friends knew that was Joan?
And I don't even know if it was friend. Like the only person was Barbara at the 2:15 time when she saw her walking with her arms outstretched.
That's
right?
what I meant.
Yeah, that one was Barbara, and that was from across the street and out window. Okay. The other one was, who knows if these people even knew who Joan was, or if Joan had been, what I assume when I did all my research is that this was after Joan went missing, and they might have put the thing up, oh, have you seen this woman, like a missing person poster, and then you could have been like, oh, I did see a woman walking down the street that day. In your head, you could probably make up, oh, I think that was her, right?
It's the Lacey Peterson of it all.
You could fully believe it. You know what I mean? You could fully believe it that you saw that person because that's what your brain does.
I think, and even Barbara could have fully believed it. She might have been missing before Barbara saw her.
That's true. If Barbara didn't notice, and no offense to Barbara, but Barbara didn't notice that the children were in the yard playing, does she even know what time that Joan was outside with her arms outstretched? Maybe that timeline's all messed up too. Okay, let's talk about the next theory, that Joan was killed by a lover. Maybe Joan was having an affair and the person came over that day. She took Lillian across the street. She wanted to have some quiet time with her lover, and maybe they had a couple beers or whatever was going on, and guy ends up being a complete asshole and kills her or gets her out of the house. Something happens, like they get into a fight, right? He injures her. It's not enough to kill her, but she's trying to get away. She's trying to call the cops. He pulls the phone. She can't do it. And he gets her out to his car, which is maybe the weird car that we've seen now a few times, and takes her away. That's one of the thoughts. Of course, again, we're going to go back to Martin. Mark says, oh, no, we had a great relationship. Joan would never do that. All of her friends and family, of course, say, oh, Joan would never do that. But we're thinking 60s again. What a terrible thing for a woman to have an affair. You know what I mean? No one's going to admit that. The way I look at that too is, let's say Your neighbors might know, but that was like real hush. Don't talk about that.
Could it be like a lover that Martin had, or somebody that was like single white female type thing?
Oh, I hadn't thought of that. It's Martin's lover. You're really going back to Martin.
Let's just go down the affair route. So they get in an argument. He whacks her over the head. And in my opinion, head wounds notoriously bleed quite a bit.
Oh, yeah.
And instantly goes, oh my God, like, I'm so sorry. I don't know what came over me. Let's get you to the hospital. Takes her out to the car, never to be seen again.
Uh-huh. Part of the thought too is, if you remember, there was blood drops, just drops on the stairs. Right? There was a drop on the stairs, drop in the hallway, drop in the children's room. It's highly possible that before Joan left the house or anything, she checked on David. And that's why there were blood drops up the stairs. And maybe you're on the right path. Maybe she was like, let me please just at least go check on my son and make sure he's still sleeping, or like something like that. Okay, because this case just is, for me anyway, I went down a Reddit rabbit hole, which is not always the best place to be, but what happens? And I will say that not everything on Reddit is true, of course. We all know that. But it does give you some interesting theories. I'm going to give credit to this Redditor. This person was called the Lucky Wilbury. This person said that at the time, so that neighborhood that Joan and her neighbors lived in was a location that the Revolutionary War had taken place in. And at the time, there was a man that was working for a company that was trying to buy up these neighborhood properties to make this more of a historic park. This person was going around to these houses, seeing if anyone would sell their houses to them. He was a creepy guy who would make advances at some of the women in the neighborhood. He was really friendly, was the word they used, friendly with the quotation. And this person was speculating that perhaps he was trying to make an advance towards Joan. Maybe he knew that Joan's husband was out of town. And again, we're going to go back to the fact that Lillian over at the neighbors, David sleeping, maybe he came over and Joan really wanted to get her daughter out of the house, wanted to get her daughter over somewhere else, as she was going to deal with this dude that's like kind of creepy and whatever. And she was dealing with this guy, and the guy tried to make an advance at her or whatever. And instead of the lover, it was just creepy dude came over and maybe assaulted her, maybe hit again. I like the hit her over the head theory. That makes a lot of sense to me. So maybe that was something that happened that would explain some of that stuff as well. But again, there's no evidence that it was this person. The guy did have an alibi for the day that Joan went missing, which was October 24th. He was working all day and had an alibi.
So if we go down this route, and I am sticking in this case with she sustained a head injury. He hits her over the head with the phone, or he's making advances towards her. So Joan goes to the phone, and he doesn't like that, rips it off the wall, hits her over the head with it, ends up in the trash.
The phone did have the bloody palm print and maybe like a thumb print or a fingerprint on it.
And if you get hit in the head and you go, oh my gosh, and your hand comes out covered in blood, and it's, oh yeah, we're going to call the police or an ambulance.
Yeah. Okay. So we have one more theory. And this one's kind of a doozy. I have known about this case for a little bit, but this was a brand new theory that I have never heard before, and I've not seen it anywhere except for on this Reddit thread. But in 2020, there was a book released by a man named Stephen Ahern, and I'm sorry if I say that completely wrong, but a man named Stephen wrote a book about Joan and her disappearance. The book is actually called A Kitchen Painted in Blood. He did lots of research, and he's a lawyer, took all these case files and wrote a book about this case. And at the end of the book, he had a giant theory that he threw out into the universe. And what he thinks happened is kind of wild, but here it is. Okay. When Joan was about 9 years old, she was away staying with relatives, and both of her parents and her German Shepherd dog all died in a suspicious house fire. Yeah, really sucks. The dad was found laying on the floor with the phone in his hand still, and the dog was actually found wrapped in a blanket in the basement. Yeah, suspicious house fire. I don't think they ever did solve what happened there, but Joan was now an orphan, so Joan went to go live with her aunt and her aunt's asshole husband, Frank. Okay, so her aunt adopts Joan. Joan gets along with her aunt and her aunt's sons, and they get along fine. But shortly before Joan's disappearance, her aunt's name was Alice. Alice and Frank are separated, and Frank is living in New York, and Alice is living in California at this time with their teenage daughter. So they have a teenage daughter together, and Frank is trying to get Alice to reconcile with him. Now, Joan gets word of this, and Joan is no, do not go live with him. Even one of Alice's sons, named Peter, they're both like, no, do not go live with Frank. Don't go back to him. He's a terrible asshole, narcissistic piece of shit, we can say, okay? Anyway, Joan, in order to try to convince Alice to not go back to Frank, she writes Alice a letter and basically tells Alice that when she was a teenager, Frank molested her. Alice sees this letter. Alice decides, nope, she's not getting back with Frank. Like, they're done. But unfortunately, Alice, because she's uncomfortable with the letter, she burns the letter. So there's no evidence that there was this letter. I do know, though, that police were notified of this, and this was later on after Joan's disappearance. When they do ask Frank, of course, he denies that he ever molested her and says that, of course, this never happened. We don't know if Alice actually ever confronted Frank, but what we do know is that Frank was a piece of shit. And the theory was that maybe Frank had something to do with Joan's disappearance. You know, Frank does have an alibi for the day that Joan went missing, but Frank's son, Ben, does not have an alibi. Ben worked as a bartender in New York. He was only working part-time, and his boss actually didn't know for sure if he was working on the day that Joan went missing. This author speculates that perhaps Frank had Ben do something to Joan. Maybe they had gone and staked out the place or something the week before. That's why the car was there. Maybe because they do know that Joan had never screamed. So there were no screams that were heard that day. Maybe it was somebody that she knew and she let them in. And she was, again, we're talking maybe they were in the kitchen. Again, she might get assaulted in some way in the kitchen from Ben. Again, they don't have any proof of this. This was just maybe the theory of what might have happened. Police did interview Ben, and at first he seemed really sad about Joan's disappearance. And then they go back and try to find him again in 1963, and they never do find him. They actually never find him again. They did say he was in the clink at some point, but that's all I know on that theory as well. I will go back to Martin real quick. Martin, like I said, he thought his theory was that Joan hurt herself while at the house. Maybe she wandered off. Maybe she got lost. Whatever she did to hurt herself, maybe she bumped her head and suffered amnesia and remember where she lived. He was certain that she was still alive and she was going to come back. And like I said, that's why he never changed his phone number or moved or did anything like that. He really thought that she was going to return at some point until the day he died, which was he died in 2009. But he always thought that she was just out there lost somewhere. Hopefully she would remember who she was and come home. Okay, that was all of our theories, guys. Now it's time to see what you guys have. Should we go around the circle? Let's start with Dana. Dana, do you
Yeah.
have
I'm leaning towards somebody came to the house. In my opinion, I could see maybe she wasn't feeling fulfilled in her life and was using these 25 library books as some sort of escapism almost to fantasize about not where she was in life. Whether she loved it or not, I can't imagine being a stay-at-home mom in the 60s was the easiest thing. Whether she had an affair or not, I guess I could go either way at this point, or whether it was this creepy guy that was trying to buy their property. Unfortunately, we can't lock up every creepy guy in the world. But so I'm leaning towards somebody came over, had some sort of argument, disagreement, something like that, and they hurt her with probably a head injury of some sort. And then that whole incident happened, and I could see them being like, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. She went to go check on the kids while he's trying to help clean up for her and his own tracks. Tries to go take her to the hospital, and whether on the way there she passes out from a concussion, he assumes she's passed away. And now I'm really getting into speculating territory, but I could assume that from if he was trying to take her to the hospital, either something happened on the way there that he said, I need to cover this up to cover my own behind, or he never had any intention to take her to the hospital in the first place. But a lot of that is me filling in a lot of blanks.
Okay. David?
Roe v. Wade was what, 73? I think
can't
this
remember.
has something to do with an abortion. I think there wasn't a lot of testing. I think that she had created a clean, safe place to abort a child that either was her husband that she didn't want because she wanted to get back into the career field, or because of an affair that she was having. And then the sight of the blood and stuff messed her up a little bit. And so she ran into the kitchen outside of that clean area that she had for herself, and she bled. I don't think the creepy guy, I don't see her, I don't know her, but I don't see her leaving a baby upstairs to take another child across the street just to dump it out on the lawn and go back. Like, I just don't see all that. I think it has something to do with an abortion and where we were with women's rights and ownership of bodies.
Okay. You think you were thinking she did it herself? Yeah. Okay. Okay.
Yes, I do.
I mean, she did have an image to uphold because she was part of that women's voting
Yeah.
thing.
And there's such a stigma. I just want to say that people are always like, why, if she hurt herself or if she was really feeling like she was in danger here, why did she not just go to Barbara's house, or why didn't she just tell Barbara what was going on?
It seems very Stepford wife to me.
Yeah, it could be. And that's one thing. The other, there's so much stigma for any of these things. If it was an abortion, if it was a miscarriage, or even if it was like a lover, like you can't tell people, especially at that time, anything like that. You gotta touch on everything, right? So yeah. Okay, Janelle.
I don't like this case. Everything feels like such a reach. So Barbara is her like best friend, right?
I would probably say best friend. Yeah.
There's no way if my best friend lived across the street from me, there's no way she would not know anything and everything about my life. First, she's my best friend. Whether she lives 30 minutes away, she would already know. But especially if she lived across the street from me, she's going to know everything. And if you're both housewives and you're bored, you're going to talk. There's no way she's having some illicit affair and having her best friend neighbor watch the kids and not explaining why. That doesn't make any sense to me.
But so may I ask you if loyalty is to be with your friend, and when you think of that time and women's rights and all that shit, wouldn't you go down for your best friend of no, she was good, prim and proper?
I don't think you would watch your best friend's husband and kids go through this for the duration of their lives. I think you, if you knew that she was dead and knew of a reason why it probably happened, you would spare them that.
I
Like,
think you have a really good point, Janelle. I think you do. I think maybe for the husband, maybe you wouldn't, but
Yeah.
for the kids, I think even if it was like, the neighbor was on her deathbed or something, you need to know what happened to your mom.
Yeah.
I think you have a pretty good point there.
there's no way any rational human being could watch somebody for whatever, how many years was that? Almost 50 years of just, she's alive. She's going to come home any day now.
Yeah.
Like,
But also,
I don't
if
think you
if
could do that.
Barbara asked, "Hey, girl, what's with that car in your driveway?" There's nothing that says, "Oh, that's the TV repair guy and the guy I'm sleeping with." If she's trying to protect her reputation and it's this short-term fling because they were only there, the car was only seen there twice, Missy.
Yeah, it was seen
And
the week before and then the day of.
so he's only been there twice in the week before. So if I'm having an affair and my best friend's like calling me out on it and I'm not planning on, because before the day of, he'd only been there once. So if it was just a one-time quickie thing, what does my best friend need to know?
And I just go back to, this is somebody that you probably spend every single day with in some form or fashion, whether it's an hour, whether it's 5 hours. Like, I'm just putting my housewife hat on, which not a housewife, not a wife, but that is my entire life and best friend is right across the street, like we're ingrained. We are like, there are no secrets there.
So
They
when you
probably
mentioned-
knew each other better than their husbands knew them.
Oh,
So
we
is there a
mentioned
place for plausible
husband.
deniability then? Where it's new car in the driveway and she's, oh, yeah. So it's like they know what they're talking about, but it's never anything said.
But I still think you would come forward and say something to spare
The kids. Yeah.
this family. And also, I think it's real weird to jump from I don't know to it's got to be amnesia.
And if she did say something, the husband, like, she was having an affair, right? And he was like, no, we had a great marriage.
Everybody says that.
yeah,
Well,
everybody
right, but
says-
if he
Scott Peterson
believes
said that.
but if
Everybody
he
says
believes
they
that we
do.
had a great marriage, then nobody's gonna tell him that she was having an affair.
I was just thinking of all the men out there. Okay, I'm
Who-
sorry, but
who's
all of the
gonna-
times that women leave men, and then men are like, well, why'd she leave? We had a great relationship, but she's been telling him for months and months, this is what's wrong. Please fix this, or let's work on this. And he's, I don't know.
Like, I don't want to have any more kids because I want to get back into the workforce.
And also, if your wife disappears, you're not gonna like
You don't put yourself on blast.
correct. Everybody's gonna say everything was perfect, everything was great. It's
Yeah.
I don't know. Like, everything about this case is just a red herring.
I think it's Barbara. We talked about
I really do.
well, because
Oh,
we talked about how
gosh, of
he's
course
lived
you
in
did,
the house for
Jamie.
50 years. But we've not mentioned, where did Barbara go after this happened? What relationship do they have with Barbara after this happened?
I don't know.
So when we say, oh, for 50 years, she's watched these children in torment, and we watched this husband not leave and not remarry and just bury himself in sorrow, we don't know where Barbara is. We don't know that Barbara watched any of that shit.
You're right. You have a
I-
very good point. We don't know anything about Barbara.
They were
Actually. That's where-
lesbians and they ran away together. That was a stretch. But
Okay, Jamie, let's hear it.
Okay, so remember earlier I talked about how you said there was a lover theory and it could be, and I was like, yeah, but I don't think it was her lover. And I think we talked about that, but could it have been Martin's lover? And maybe not even Martin's lover. Maybe we don't know much about Barbara. Was she married? I can't remember. She did have a child, right?
Kids.
Yeah,
Or-
she had at least one kid that
I'm
was, yeah.
here to tell you that you can have kids without getting married. I
No,
tried it
Yeah,
once.
actually, I know that one. Yeah, I got that one too.
But I'm wondering if she was jealous of whatever they had for some reason. And so she, like I said, like single white female was like, I'm gonna out this bitch, right? A couple of reasons why I think that. So I kept going back to, first of all, the car. If she hired somebody to go with me, go down this
Okay.
I'll
story.
go down it. I'll go down
Jamie.
all the roads with you, Jamie.
It all
Jamie,
makes
I-
sense.
Your
I love
face.
Jamie's Islands. I love them.
was
Okay.
All makes
Barbara a
sense.
cop?
There's no, no,
I
the
mean-
police are gone today. Spoiler alert, there's no police connection. No. So, okay, the car. So she didn't do it herself, obviously. She had to hire somebody, right? So the car came there to, I see, can't, okay,
I cannot.
okay.
I just need to
Um,
live inside Jamie's brain for
Oh my gosh, me too.
like 2 minutes, just 2 minutes to see like how we like the forward progression to
So I promise it makes sense. So there's other things I'm going to talk about besides the car. So she hired somebody. They came to stake the house out. That's why we saw this car there before. Weird car in the driveway. Robert knew when she was going to be gone or when she was going to be there or not be there. So that's number one. Number two is, and I wrote it down in my notes, this is real sketch. You went shopping and you had to make a big production of dropping this other child off so you could go shopping, and you were gone for a half hour. Like, where did you go? To Walgreens or whatever the hell was down? You didn't go like clothes shopping or anything like that, because clearly you weren't there and back in a half hour. That's crazy. You went and got gas or something, or you did something to maybe have an alibi, or maybe that story wasn't even true, but that seemed really off to me. I'm going to go set this kid here, be gone for a half hour, and oh my God, when I come back, all these things are happening. But along with that, so we talked about how, or I talked about, and I think a couple other people agreed with me, if she was going to leave on her own or any of that happened, like why would she leave the baby upstairs, right? So that was a weird thing. So I think Barbara knew, I'm only gonna be gone for this long. I know she's going to be dead, gone, whatever. I know the baby will be okay because I know in my head I'm going to be back in a half hour. So I don't have to worry about the kids that much. I know when I drop Lily off in this front yard, I'm going to be back in 30 minutes to discover all of this that has happened. So that's the other thing. When I went back to when we were talking about eyewitness accounts don't really always add up to the truth. She could have been making that whole story up. What if she was like, oh yeah, I saw her out here during this time and all of these things, and she was making up her own alibi to an extent, right? And then to David's point earlier, we don't know where the hell she is after this. Maybe she did leave town. I imagine probably not, or they would have questioned her, but I don't know. I know I'm out on the island, like probably 500,000 miles away from you all, but I do think there are some valid points.
No, that's what I was thinking. You went into more detail than what I thought, but I'm right there with you. How many people saw?
The milkman saw a car, and then the girl getting off the school bus saw a car, and another person who was driving down the road had to stop their car as this car was backing out of their driveway.
So 3 sightings.
So that's 3, 2 in the same
3
day.
sightings of 3 different cars.
I believe it might have been the same car, but I don't know. And the thought that when we talked about the other guy that was trying to buy property, could have very well been his car.
Right.
I do also, I want to play into Jamie's theory just a smidge and say that the dogs, when they did bring the sniffing dogs in to see if they could find her trail, the furthest that it went was to Barbara's house.
Which is easily explained, right? They're besties.
Right.
I'm not trusting the Barb.
Not just in the barb. Okay, Carolina.
I don't even know how to like come after the Barbara theory like at all right now, because that came out of total left field. I was not thinking that at all. You made some interesting points though. I will give you that. Those were some very
Appreciate
interesting
you being
points.
nice about it.
I don't know if I'm going to come to the island, but it is interesting because she was the main person and the main witness that alerted all of this. So she could have manipulated it. I have to ask a question before I give my thoughts of it that may just poke all the holes in everything I'm about to say. The trench coat.
Yes.
Do we know that she owned a trench coat that was missing from the house?
Yes.
Okay. All right, good. I thought that you had said that, but I wanted to make sure. So I feel like I am mostly aligned with Dana's theory, I think. I think she probably had a head injury, either from somebody that was in the house that inflicted the head injury on her, and she had the time, or they allowed her to drop Lillian off at the neighbor's house next door. She had some level of time to do that, where it could have been a situation where maybe they didn't come in with the intent to kill her and the intent to hurt her, and ended up hitting her, and then use that ruse of Dana said of, let's go to the hospital, let's go do all of this, which explains like the blood trail going out of the house. I think that's a possibility. But I feel like more what I am leaning towards is that she did get a head injury of some kind. She was not thinking completely clearly, maybe grabbed her coat with the hanger on it still, started walking out of the house, had the blood on her hand, like in the house, I guess, probably to explain what happened in the house too. She hit her head, somehow got a head injury, put her hand to her head, came back with the blood, tried to make a phone call. Maybe because she was so disoriented, fell, pulled the phone off the wall, realized that wasn't going to work. So she needed to leave the house to try to get help, took the hanger with the coat on it, went out of the house, was taking the coat off the hanger all at that same time, threw the hanger on the back of the car. That would explain the kind of the palm print with the blood on the car. And then if she's walking down that highway, the Route 128 or whatever you said, if there's like construction sites there, if she was disoriented from the head injury, she could have wandered into there and then unfortunately succumbed to her injuries. And if they didn't clearly search those areas, it's very possible that they just would not have found her at all in that area. So I feel like that's my...
The one thing that I do have that I would like to ask y'all's opinion on that, because I think it was brilliant, but I feel like we're coming at that with a mindset of where we are in 2023. But in 1961,
yeah,
like people stopped for people. Everybody waved for. I feel like if you saw someone bleeding today, you would pedal to the metal and get the fuck away and pray for the best. But I feel like then, like, someone would have been like, we got to help you. Am I wrong with that train of thought?
I wondered that at some point as well. Like, why, if you see a woman who's walking down a busy intersection, down the median of a busy place, Or even if she's not, even if she's walking down the street and she's wearing a trench coat and she looks like she's clutching her abdomen and she looks really disheveled and there's blood on the back of her legs, why are we not stopping?
And I feel like that part of it, if that was her walking down the street, that completely takes out the theory that she faked her own disappearance. Because if you're trying to do that, you're not going to put yourself in a position where you're totally conspicuous. You have this scarf around your head, you have blood on you, you're making a point to like act like you're injured. Like there would just be too many chances for an intervening factor of somebody to stop and prevent you from disappearing yourself, basically.
But there's also nothing that says somebody didn't stop and offer her a ride to the hospital and then never go to the hospital.
How far away was that highway? Because I'm just wondering how she got there.
It was like 5 or 6 miles.
That's a lot when you're bleeding.
That's a lot when you're bleeding.
That's a lot when you're not bleeding.
That's a lot and the problem that I had with that is I don't know how fast you guys walk, but I'm definitely not walking 5 or 6 miles in an hour.
That's what I was going to ask. How much time was in between?
It was like the last time that Barbara, that we don't know if she was telling the truth or not, saw her at 2:15-ish. And then this was like 3:15, 3:30.
Again, we're just relying on eyewitness statements
from the highway sighting. Yeah.
From people who we have no idea if they're like, I don't know.
Especially with the timing.
This is like us just sitting in a dark room and just creating, like, this is how Jamie gets to her theories. Like,
I disagree with that just a little bit. When you think about where we were in the 60s, there wasn't as many visual distractions as there are today. And I feel like I would trust a eyewitness statement more than I do now. Am I wrong with that thought?
I think it's all relative. Like, we think things were so different back then. They probably weren't.
I don't know. The police report was on a chiseled on a rock, Janelle.
But I mean,
it was the 60s.
Like, how is the milkman any different than a mailman?
Or the Amazon delivery guy?
Or the Amazon delivery guy. We're going to trust the milkman? Like, you know
but
what
we
I mean?
also don't have surveillance from the stores that she went to. So the whole timeline, and the only thing we know for definite then is she vanished into thin air.
Which is the exact title of the book she was reading.
Oh my gosh.
Which is interesting. Missy, what's your theory?
I'm going to sit in I'm a little frustrated with Janelle only in the way of every time that I think I have a theory in this case, there's a reason that it's not a good theory, or there are like 5 different theories and all of them make sense in a way. But then there are all reasons to discredit that same theory. I wanted to do this case because there are so many. I covered this case a long time, like a year ago, and I just made my head go, oh my gosh, I don't know what happened. And it's driving me nuts. And I needed to talk about it. I think a lot of the things make sense at the same time. And that's where it's just crazy. I do think that, to me, like the fact that she put her daughter across the street and maybe the blood spot on the carpet going upstairs and in David's room made me think that she was checking on them. No matter what it was, she was making sure her children were safe in this moment, whatever was going on with her. I go back and forth so much.
But
I think
what attacker would be like, yeah, go take your daughter to Barb's, and yeah, go check on your son. I'll wait here to abduct you or kill you, or like
an attacker hired by Barb.
Or I think an attacker that knew her potentially.
Yeah.
And
a
maybe
lot of it
come in with the intention of killing her, and then they're doing things on the fly.
Yeah. I think that makes a lot of sense. And that's why she didn't scream, or she didn't scream too, because she didn't want to wake up her kid. That's a high possibility. I think the same thing, like somebody who knew her, like somebody stopped over and she wasn't expecting them. And she was like, got Lillian out of there real quick. That's why she was like, I'll be right back. And did not say anything that second time to Barbara.
Yeah, but if you were Barb, would you not be like looking out the window like the split second she walked out the door? Like, what's going on at your house? Like,
But maybe we think that Barb's paying more attention than she is. You know, again, I don't know if she even knew the kids were in her yard.
She could have been in the shower or the bathroom.
Maybe, yeah.
Or
I
on the
mean,
phone with the hitman.
I do want to say I lean more towards Carolina's island a lot. I think that Carolina had a really good theory that makes a lot of sense. And I've gone back and forth on that theory a lot too. So this one's a hard one. And that's probably, it's still unsolved 62 years later. I will say police are still accepting tips. So if you do know anything, you can give them a call. And the number there is 541-553-2202. That is the number for any tips on what actually happened to Joan. If she was still alive today, if she did run away, start her whole new life, she'd be 93 years old. I wish I had other information for you guys, but that is it. And you know what? Whatever happened to Joan, all we can do is speculate wildly.
We don't want you to miss any of our future recordings. Please take this time now to subscribe to our YouTube channel. You can find us also on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, or TikTok at SWACPod. That's SWACPOD. Or you can contact us via email for any questions, comments, or case ideas at swacpod@gmail.com. Thank you for speculating wildly with us tonight.